Hi, this is Julia Bell, Chapter 2, Cisco iOS System, or the operating system. Location of the Cisco iOS. The iOS is stored in flash. Here's an example of a compact flash card that you might find in the backside of a Cisco router. It is non-volatile storage, means it's not lost when the power is lost, can be changed or overwritten as needed, can be used to store multiple versions of the iOS. iOS copied from the flash to your volatile RAM. Remember, volatile means when it loses power, it goes away. So quantity of flash and the RAM memory determines the iOS that you can use. So for the new iOSs, for instance, in the 15 versions, the routers we have in our room will require 64 or better. Some of the ones we have 32 in, and those won't work with the new 15 version iOS, for instance. So you have to have compact flash and also the RAM memory inside the router upgraded. iOS upgrade considerations. When you're getting ready to upgrade your operating system, here's some things you need to consider. First, what model or models of routers and switches are going to require these upgrades? Second, do the routers and switches have enough RAM and flash memory for the proposed iOS versions? If not, you'll be looking at buying and installing that memory. Again, remember RAM and the flash, you'll need to upgrade both. What features are required for these devices? If you want to move a device from a standard operating system to one with an IPsec or the full security features, that's going to require paying for the more expensive operating system, for instance, and then upgrading the memory, both RAM and flash. This is a Cisco Feature Navigator website. You notice it's got some great features here to look at. The research, the different features, you can compare two different software releases. You can also research software. The iOS functions. Some major functions performed or enabled by the Cisco iOS routers and switches include security, routing, the different routing protocols, QoS, the interfaces, managing your resources, and addressing. For instance, moving from an IPv4 to an IPv6 in a newer model. Or maybe you're upgrading an existing router to use IP version 6. Routing, for instance, some of the older iOSs don't support OSPF version 3. The new version 15 of the operating system is going to support that newer version of OSPF. iOS examination commands. This slide is worth gold. I would save this slide because it's going to help you to understand things in the future. Let's look at this section where it says RAM. Now remember, RAM is the one where if the power goes off, it loses what's in current memory. It's very volatile is the word you need to remember. As far as the operating system here, you can do something on a switch or a router. In this case, we're saying switch. Show version. What version of the operating system are you running? That's a command. Some other ones here, if you're looking at the programs, you can do show processes to show me what process are currently running on the router. You could do show CDP neighbors. In other words, it's going to see what adjacencies have been found. Don't worry, you'll understand that word a lot more in the second course. Looking at the active configuration files, this means things that we've done to change the way the router operates. That's its config. You could do show running -config to show me how it's currently configured, what you've named the router, what addresses you've put on it, things like that. Also in tables and buffers, you could do show ARP. Again, we'll talk more about ARP later, but that's going to show its addressing table that it's looked up and what it's found. Show MAC-address-table. Anywhere, for instance, that a switch has went and confirmed a machine burn-in address and build itself a table to tell which IP address that goes with. Show VLAN shows how your network is divided up in virtual private LANs. Again, more about that in ccna2, just mentioning the command right now. Again, we've looked at this side of the house, the volatile side. The power goes away and these things are in essence wiped out. You can copy the running config to the startup config, but if you do not do that, those changes, everything on this side is lost if the power goes off or if you turn the machine off. This one, non-volatile RAM. This is actually one that's not volatile, power's not going to affect it. You could also have this same list that we had under tables and buffers in a backup config file. The show ARP, the show MAC address. So that's one that can reside both in temporary and in permanent. show startup-config. If you've taken this running config and saved it, this is where you're going to save it to. Flash. Remember a moment ago I showed you that little square compact flash memory? Where the original operating systems are stored here. If you did a show space flash, it would show you everything that's saved there. If you had two versions of the operating system, one with security features, one without, it would show both of them there. If you did show flash. This one, show interfaces, it doesn't take memory to save these. These are actual physical ports on the back of the router. Whether it has power or whether it does not, those ports don't go away simply because the power went away. They're physical ports. And show version. If you do a show version, you'll notice a few things. Cisco iOS software, it is a 1900 model item that we're looking at here. Here's the iOS image. It's a universal image. 15.2, that's one of the newer releases. That it was copyrighted, that it was compiled, bootstrap version. How long has this router been up? 41 minutes. It's a Cisco 1941. I can tell by this model number. I know that's a router. The system returned to ROM by power on. In other words, how did it come back from, apparently it was turned off and turned back on at some point. The system image is actually stored in Flash. This is the name of the image, version 15.2.4, and did have a normal reload at a power on. And it goes a little further than that, but this is an example of the show version command. And this is the end of 2.4 Cisco iOS.